Good afternoon. This is Dr. John Michael Salvato, and you're watching Inner Alchemy. Welcome back. As I said, this is John Michael Salvato, and today we're continuing our 7-part series on the 7 Hermetic Principles. Today is part 4, the Principle of Polarity. Our presentation today is based on the Kybalion, which takes a look at the principles of Hermetic science and some of the more ancient writings that lead to the wisdom school and lead to a greater understanding of hermetics, of magic in our lives. So what is the principle of polarity? Well, the principle of polarity embodies the idea that everything is dual, that everything has two poles, everything has an opposite. And all manifest things have two sides, two aspects, or two distinct poles. It recognizes that opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. All paradoxes, according to the principle, may be reconciled. Now, I'll tell you that when I first began to look at this, coming from an esoteric Buddhist background and an Advaita, non-dualist background, I had difficulty with this because the idea that everything was dualistic when my philosophy was, according to how I thought, non-dualistic, seemed to be at odds with this principle. But as I began to unpack what it actually teaches and began to study Hermetics more deeply, I began to understand that there was actually no disparity at all. You see, this is about taking the journey to non-dualism through duality. Understanding that all manifest things have two sides, two aspects, two poles. So we'll use, for example, the idea of hot and cold. Now, the principle of polarity tells us that there is no difference between hot and cold, that they are the same thing. They only differ by degrees. And I like to use that as an example because when we measure heat and cold, we measure it in units that we refer to as degrees. So if you would picture a thermometer, and at one end of the thermometer is 0, at the other end of the thermometer we'll say is 100. And so at what point does the cold at 0 cease to be cold and become heat? Well, that might be a different answer for every person. Maybe for some people, when the temperature is at 60 degrees, then at 60 it ceases to be cold. For others, it might be when the temperature is at 70 degrees. For others, it might be at 72 degrees. It's all a matter of our perception. If you look on the screen in front of you, you see a candle in the darkness. At which point does the light of the candle cease to be light and become the darkness? There are varying degrees. So that's what this is. It's an opportunity for us to really understand that there is no duality in the world by recognizing the manifest duality. So when we talk about this, we're talking about understanding that a lot of the perceptions that we have are based entirely on mental constructs. Large versus small, light versus dark, hard versus soft, noise versus quiet. You know, at what point does noise cease to be noise and become quiet? At what point does hard become soft? You have to recognize that these are things on a spectrum. And light versus dark, we already talked about. Large versus small. Again, it all comes down to our perception. So the practitioner of magic or alchemy or esoteric arts is someone who has made a commitment to see beyond the dualistic appearance and who works with the energy around phenomena, transmuting causes and conditions to achieve a desired effect. So we're not trying to force our will upon something. We're not trying to change things unnaturally. We're simply recognizing that in everything there are those polar opposites, and that by shifting the energy we can transmute that condition or that cause or that situation. So it's possible to change the vibrations of dis-ease to ease, of hostility to harmony, of fear to love, simply by recognizing that they are two parts of the same whole. In your own life, think about a time when somebody that you absolutely loved did something so hurtful that you hated them. What happened? Where was that place where that emotion changed from love to hatred? Well, I would suggest that if you really were honest with yourself, if you really were mindful of what happened, it wasn't that it changed to something different. It's that the degree of attachment, the degree of fascination, the degree of affection changed and shifted. And that shifts by way of your vibrational frequency. Remember what we talked about in last week's program. And when we understand that our vibrations affect the outcome, that our vibrations affect the manifestation of anything and everything in our lives, then it stands to reason by the laws of science that if we shift the vibrations, we can change that manifestation. We can change how things appear to us. So one of my favorite quotes when it comes to talking about this concept is the works of Alan Watts, who was a Buddhist, a Zen Buddhist teacher and an Episcopalian, albeit an extraordinary Episcopalian priest, who said that duality is always secretly unity. You know, these again are some of the mysteries of that are revealed in the mystery school. That duality is secretly unity. Again, if the law of polarity exists, then we must know that something that appears to be dual must also be unified, must also be one, two parts of the same whole. So it's about seeing beyond appearances. And that's what I think that we can bring to our spiritual practice as esoteric practitioners, as witches, as warlocks, mages, healers, whatever the term is that you identify with. We need to learn to see beyond appearances. On the screen in front of you, you've got the angel of light and the angel of dark, if you will. And when we look at those appearances, we see that it's a matter of our perception. It's a matter of individuality as to which one speaks more to us, which one resonates more with us. And when we can reach that point, then I think we can reach a point in recognizing that some of the things that cause division between us are actually matters of perception as well. They're nothing more than constructs that we created. Earlier this week, somebody said, there's people out there who believe that magic is all psychological. There's people out there who believe that the gods and goddesses are just archetypes. And I couldn't help but realize when I was watching this conversation unfold, and the person eventually blocked me, for suggesting to them that it's not black and white, that this is a spectrum, and that it's possible for magic to have roots in psychology and psychology to have roots in magic. It's possible that a deity can both be an archetype, and because the stories that are told about the deities, the stories, the mythos itself are archetypal mythos, because we can see some of the same patterns across cultures and in different traditions. But maybe those beings themselves were physical beings. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Maybe they were people from, or beings from another dimension. And so in our primitive minds, we thought of them as gods and goddesses. maybe it's possible for someone like myself to not embrace the idea of a creator God. That just simply isn't part of my worldview and my spiritual view. To believe that there was a God or a goddess that created all things. But that doesn't mean that I can't have a personal relationship with gods or goddesses, with demons or angels, with any sort of spiritual beings. And that those beings can be as real for me as they are archetypes. So when we learn to begin to see beyond appearances, things begin to shift. We begin to let go of limiting perspectives. And so the challenge ceases to exist to be able to justify our relationship with psychology and our relationship with magic, because they are two sides of the same coin. That our relationship with naturopathic medicine versus our relationship with hedge witchery become simple to justify, because they are two sides of the same coin. The naturopath today was the hedge witch of ancient times. Personal development versus spiritual development, two sides of the same coin. And so today, while this is a brief overview, a brief look at the principle of polarity, it's nonetheless something that I think we need to spend a greater deal of time inwardly considering how that may be true. So in your own life, if there are things that seem to be opposites, for example, financial struggles, someone says, well, how can you say that being rich and being poor are the same thing? They are the same thing. Your financial stability is one thing, and there is a spectrum. There are varying degrees, and what might be abundance for one person might be poverty for another. What might be poverty for one person might feel like abundance for another. So when we understand these things, happiness becomes truly the object and design of our existence. We're able to let go of those things which cause suffering, because we recognize that the true nature of all things is unity, and that we experience the unity by learning to recognize the two sides of that one coin. I mean, I think the coin analogy is probably the one that made it the easiest for me to be able to grasp, because you can have one coin, and on that one coin there can be an image on each side. Let's grab a coin here, and let's see, this one is actually a quarter. So on one side of the quarter, there is George Washington. On the other side of this particular quarter, there's the Statue of Liberty, and it's dirty, so I can't see if that's a state that's behind it or not. But it's still one quarter. So whether it's Statue of Liberty side or George Washington side, two sides of one coin doesn't change that this is 25 cents. So in our lives, we may be experiencing excuse me, a health challenge, and that health challenge may cause us to feel not at ease. That's what dis-ease is. We may feel a little off. We may not feel at our optimum. But that doesn't change the true nature of who we are. And that doesn't change our ability to raise our vibrations. And we can raise those vibrations by thinking healthier thoughts, by recognizing that our body is an incredible machine that's able to heal itself, by taking medication, or by using herbs, or by practicing ritual. All of those things, and together or separately, can help us to elevate our vibrational frequency. And when we do that, we return to that place of ease. So I hope that you'll take time to think about this. It might seem really simple, and for us to be able to have shared this with you in 15 minutes, where most of our classes take 30, this might feel like it was almost a superficial endeavor. But I promise you that as you begin to work with the principle of polarity in your life, as you begin to recognize that there are things that we've thought were real, that we've thought separated us from our true nature, as pure awareness, as love, or as light, or however you want to perceive that or express that. Whenever there are things that seem to pull us away from that source, we can quickly discover that they are two sides of the same coin. That your bliss and suffering are two sides of the same coin. So it's within your power and mine to choose differently, to elevate the vibration so that we move from that place of sterile coldness to the place of abundant, lush vibrance in our lives. So as we say at the end of every one of these programs, I want to encourage you to stay in the moment. Because in the moment is where we recognize and have the capacity to recognize that polarity that exists in all things. To recognize the yin and the yang make up one whole. And to choose to do something, to think something, to take action in some way to increase our vibrational frequency if we're not satisfied with where we're at right now. And then to recognize that as practitioners of magic, that is what we're doing at every point, is we're working with vibrational frequencies. And when we learn how to do that, when we master that, then these lines we draw in the sand become so much less important, and they become, in fact, meaningless. So stay in the moment and be grateful for everything you've got. That opens the door for the abundance that's waiting for you. And always remember, my friends, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon.